All right, let's get into the Nagelsmann situation because I think it's interesting. We talked endlessly about the Nagelsmann sacking with Jules. Now we're in this situation where, and we asked with Nagelsmann, like, why now, right? If he's the wrong guy, and you realize from Bayern's perspective after 20 months that he's the wrong guy, even though you're still in the running for the treble. And one of the reasons that people kept saying, oh, but Thomas Tuchel was available. Thomas Tuchel was available, you know, as if we're talking, Sir Alex Ferguson's available, but we got to act now, you know. And now I wonder if it's history repeating itself, right? Because now, like, oh, Julian Nagelsmann's available, right? Because he's literally just been sacked. But we have to act now. And strengthening, as we mentioned earlier, the Nagelsmann link is the fact that the model that they've adopted is very much in line with the Red Bull organization, where he's worked before in terms of acquiring all these young players and trying to develop them and whatever. And obviously, the fact that the technical director and the Vivell and the co-sporting director, or one of the two co-sporting directors, Lawrence Stewart, have worked in the Red Bull organization before. Now, my sense here is I'm wondering if we're kind of immediately jumping in and making it 2 + 2 = 5. Because in Tuchel's case, I said, like, if Tuchel made you believe that you need to sign him now, otherwise he's going to sign for freaking Spurs, because he said, oh, he could sign for Spurs or Real Madrid. I mean, like, if Tuchel believed he had a legitimate shot at Real Madrid, he would be waiting for Real Madrid.
Yeah.
And as far as Spurs, if he's got a shot at going at Bayern, he's going to take Bayern, right, over Spurs. So, like, you know, it seemed silly to me. With Nagelsmann, I think, is a different dynamic, though, because he's a younger manager. He's got many years of his career ahead of him. And I think the sacking's been pretty traumatic for him. So I don't believe, and I stand to be corrected, I don't believe that, 10 days after getting sacked, he's going to walk into the Chelsea job between now and the end of the season. Do you?
Between now and the end of the season, possibly, imminently, no. But I think you've made some very good points there, especially for such a young manager, for him to be pushed out the way that he was. And as is the case with most managers, he probably feels he didn't deserve to lose his job. And then seeing the way that Chelsea's been for the last year or so, the project that Chelsea have, yes, they do have some similarities to RB, but they've also got about 30 first-team players to try and deal with. And I don't know, do you want to be a manager that comes to a club and you've got to be involved in the clear-out? That seems quite stressful. Chelsea, for me, are a team whereby they want to build for the future, but they also require success today. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. But it seems very, very tough. And a manager will obviously believe in himself. But does he genuinely think that this is the right spot for him, given what's just happened to him at Bayern Munich? I'm not sure. What do you think?
I think a lot would depend on how much trust he puts on the guys he already knows at Chelsea, and his assessment of how empowered they're going to be able to.
Do you think they are empowered?
I mean, look, I'm assuming they've been brought in for a reason, right? I'm assuming we're not going to have the repeat of last summer where, Chelsea's transfer dealings were handled by Todd Bowley fresh off the boat and a stressed out Thomas Tuchel not sleeping at night and because he's up at all hours watching Y-Scout and giving opinions on players he doesn't know, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, and a couple of agents. I mean, that's...
Why would that change, though?
That was Chelsea's... Well, because we saw in January, all these guys, David Datro, Fofana, Malo Gusto, Badiashile, these guys have Stewart and Vivell fingerprints all over them, right? That is the profile of player, right? Young guy, upside. Enzo a bit less so because he's so expensive. I don't quite know what's going to happen with that one. So Nagelsmann says, you guys, I trust you. I've worked with you before. I think you guys have the power. I don't think Nagelsmann will also be interested in the dynamic of the ownership dynamic at Chelsea, right? We've said there's 6 or 7 different people in there. It's not entirely Bowley's club. Bowley said, okay, I'll take the lead in being more involved day to day this year, but I'm going to assume that Bowley also loves the LA Dodgers. Bowley loves his day job too. I don't think he's committed to living in London for as long as it takes to turn Chelsea around, right? Mm. So I think at some point he's going to want to hand it over to people. And that could mean either another one of the big shareholders gets involved, or maybe they hire a different CEO who's more operational than the guy they have now, Tom Glick, very highly respected, but I think he'd be the first to tell you he's more of a, previously at City, he's more of a commercial guy. And obviously that's very important, and deal with that in the stadium. So I think there's different scenarios there. I think you need to convince Nagelsmann that those guys are going to be in charge, that they've got the backing. And you also need to get a sense of what your latitude is going to be on the market. Because most people would say that they need a defensive midfielder come what may. I know Conte's back in training and stuff. He may get another year, but he's not getting any younger either. And you think he's played 2 games this season. You need somebody else there, right? In central midfield.
Yeah.
The center forward thing, a lot of people think they do. The fact that they signed Christopher Nkunku suggests to me that maybe they don't feel that way. Mm-hmm. Maybe Vivell and what's his name doesn't feel that way. And he's just like, all right, we got Nkunku, Havertz, false 9, move around, blah, blah, blah. Broja will be fit next season, whatever, you know. So, but you have to make those decisions. And as I see it, and this is, I think, one of the interesting dynamics that they're going to have to hit, is a conventional wisdom. One of the explanations for why Potter failed, that a lot of fans believe, and a lot of people in the media believe, is the job was too big for him, right? He didn't have the experience of working at a big club. He didn't have the experience of having to play midweek football all the time. Didn't have the experience of not having a preseason. He didn't have all this stuff, right? Because he didn't have that at Brighton. So that would suggest, okay, this time around you need to bring somebody who's more accustomed to working in those conditions. That means a big name manager. That means a Nagelsmann, a Pochettino, somebody like that, right? A Luis Enrique, or I don't think it's going to be him. The problem is if you bring in a big name manager of that ilk, they're going to say, well, hang on a minute. As you mentioned, those 50 guys I need to move out in place. Can you do that for me? So then I got some money left over because I don't like this player. I like this player. I feel like I need this guy. You know, there's a lot of decisions to be made. And if you're a big manager, I mean, you don't have to be, you can be Antonio Conte kicking and screaming, or Jose Mourinho, or other people do it more subtly, but you're going to want to put your stamp on the team in your dialogue. Can they afford that? And certainly they said, we've spent all our money now. Don't expect us to spend another $500 million next summer.
Yeah, I think that's what adds to the sort of nuance of this situation. Because you say in theory, you could go for a big name manager. You could do that. But most of those big name managers made their name at clubs which had relative stability, and you added 1 or 2 pieces to it. Whereas this is a time now where a club is essentially in transition, where, you know, what's the core actually going to be? How many players do you need to move on? And it's not just, say, youngsters or people who are on the periphery. Like, there's certain people who are established first teamers who might not be part of the long-term vision. You look at
Mason Mount's contract situation.
So much stuff like that. And I think if I was in that camp, I'd like something more stable. Because if you then try and bring me in, well, what do you want me to do? Like, my dad always makes this point. There's some great managers and stuff, but they also do better because they're at the very top with the best players. But then I know lots of managers who couldn't be at the top with the best players and manage those situations. It feels like they're in transition at this moment. It's maybe not the right time for one of those big managers. But then maybe if they can do the business properly in the summer in terms of knowing who's going to be out, who's going to be in, what the future looks like, then maybe that's when it's more exciting for somebody to come in. So I wouldn't necessarily think that them bringing in someone now is the best thing for that manager to do well, because I don't know what it look like come the end of the season.
I mean, they're going to have a major FFP issue in the summer as well.
I know it's West London, but there are quite a few problems here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. So I think the rational choice, either you believe Nagelsmann, either Nagelsmann says, yeah, I want to come here, I want to bounce back, I'm fully committed, I trust these guys and so on. And I'm going to put my rep on the line again, right? By moving in these situations, which is going to be a tougher situation than what he had in Munich, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I think you look for an up-and-comer. You actually look for a Potter type, obviously not Potter.
but Potter 2.0.
But somebody who says, you know what, I'm just going to coach, and I'll work with what you have, and I'll work with the general guidelines that are set down by Stewart and Vivell, by the club's longer-term plan, and I'm going to try to make it work, and I'm going to do the best I can.
Who is that?
Well, you talk about all those managers who never had the great players, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to go tomorrow, and I'm not saying you should get him, but like any kind of mid-table company man guy, it's not going to be Carlo Ancelotti, right? Because of obvious reasons. But he was always the company man who never complained about the players his club got him. Now, obviously, when you manage Real Madrid, and you tend to have good players in Chelsea and PSG, but
for sure.
Somebody like that, but younger, who also plays a style of football that Chelsea want to play, because there's very much an RB Brighton, ethos to this. And maybe he's not a big name. Maybe that, to me, that would be the rational thing. But then if you get that wrong, there's going to be the backlash. Haven't you learned your lesson? We need the big charismatic guy. We need the Poch type. I think Nagelsmann in some ways is a synthesis of those two things, and that's why he's being so strongly linked. But whether Nagelsmann wants to come straight back again, even just straight back this summer, I don't know. So
football's such an amazing sport. Like, as a manager, you can be sacked and you are jobless, but you're the most enticing thing in all of Europe now because you're out of work.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's also the whole sliding doors aspect to it, right? If they don't sack Tuchel in September, at a minimum, they're like 25 to 30 million richer, just simply with the compensation to Brighton for Potter. They're probably no worse off on the table, and Nagelsmann's still in a job at Bayern.
Brendan Rodgers.
Stop it with the Brendan Rodgers. We'll be getting to Brendan Rodgers later. But it's interesting because even with Brendan, right, you have the same issue, right? There's perception that he failed miserably at Liverpool, and then nobody likes him. Yeah. Even though I think he tries to be, he's been more humble since, right? At Leicester. But that perception, you couldn't handle it in a big stage at Liverpool, and then he comes to Chelsea, a couple of bad results. He can't handle it on a big stage.
So it's your fault. So you work in the media, it's your fault.
Exactly. It's all down to the media.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.